Alrighty. Ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da. All right. We're about to get rolling. It's already here. Well, not yet. Not quite yet. I still have 1 minute. But in a minute, we're about to really officially. Oh, there we go. I see that we already have Earl's daughter and Virginia Araiza right here, ready and waiting. Shalom. Shalom to you both. And Lachaim, because you're the first. I see the nomadic Hebrew is back again. Shalom, shalom. Good to have you guys here. I'm excited. And just like before, we're going to give this just a little bit of time so that the people start rolling in and see who can join us. I just realized how horrible this whole time zones thing is. I had a friend that I was talking to yesterday and I asked him to join. But in his side of the world, right now is 2 in the morning, which is going to be a little bit tough. But if he can join, he can join. I see Alma is here, MS is here. Shalom, shalom. All right. And just like before, let's go ahead and check audio. Please give me a little thumbs up emoji or just let me know if you can hear me clearly. If it's too loud and it's popping too much, let me know also. I want to make sure that everything is smooth. Palm Springs is 6 p.m. That's a good time. 6 p.m. sounds good. All right. I'm getting the thumbs up. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so excited to have all of you here. And look at all those thumbs up. Daniel, shalom, clear. I like it. I like it. All right, we're just going to give it a couple more minutes. Maybe 2 more minutes and then we can get rolling. And I just wanted to know, since we're like the early bird crowd right here in this live stream, can you guys let me know how you knew that we were having this live stream? Did you see it on my Instagram? Did you see it on the community page on YouTube? Did you watch my previous video? Or did you just get the notification? Let me know right here just so I know what's the best way to reach out to this family that we are so that we can make it efficient. Okay, the nomadic Hebrew says it was a notification. Okay, cool, cool. So the notifications work. Hey, if you are not part of that notification squad, as they say here on YouTube, make sure you hit that bell button. Don't just subscribe, hit the bell button to make sure you get notified whenever I go. Community page and last video. Woo! I see, I see. Very good. And Alma says notification as well. Daniel asks, how is my family doing? We're doing really great. Our shalom was super, super chill. We stood home all day pretty much, just chilling. When we went out for a walk for a little bit, so that was nice, even though it was not the nicest of weather, but it was good. All right, so let's see. So everything to the page, good. All right, just a couple more, 2 more minutes, and we'll start. We'll get going. Sorry, guys. I know that it's kind of annoying to wait, but I wanted to give a chance for everybody that can come on to come on because last week I got a couple of messages of people saying that they were kind of sad that they weren't able to join us. But the good thing is that I see pretty much everyone that is here right now was here on the last live stream. So that's really awesome to have all of you here again. All right. And just as a little heads up, this live stream that we're doing right now, I am going to go ahead and keep it on the page just like the last live stream that we did so that we can go ahead and watch it. I see Dr. Gemini's reaction is here. Yay! If you guys don't remember, Dr. Gemini Reactions was the person that was shooting all the awesome questions on the last live stream. But this live stream is going to be a little bit different. It's a little bit more organized. As you saw this time, I actually let you know what time I was going to begin. I started it right on time. And this time, we actually do have a set amount of time because yesterday, not yesterday, I'm sorry, last time that we did the live, it took like over 2 hours, and that was wild. But this hour, this time, I'm going to go ahead and set up an hour and a half of time for this and I'll go over the rules in just 1 minute. Ah, Dr. Gemini Reaction says, Shalom, shalom, shalom. Let's see, Jenny Rodriguez. I made it this time. Yes, I'm glad that you made it as well. I'm glad that you're here. I'm so happy. Earl's daughter, no problem. Take your time. The more you reach, the better. Hey, glory to God. I'm so excited. And I'm not even drinking coffee right now. I'm actually just drinking this super watered down tea. Maybe I should get coffee though, because it's still pretty early for me. I slept in as much as I could. All right, there we go. It's already 10:05. Let's begin. So, everyone, welcome to the live stream. Welcome, welcome. This is Messianic Me TV, the live stream. I'm your host, Daniel, and today we're going to be talking about the temple, the sacrifice, and the high priest. Basically, we're going to be going over the video that I just put out yesterday. So if you haven't seen it, I'm going to link it to this video once it's out. So we're going to be specifically talking about that topic or topics related to it for the first hour. Of course, I will be talking, but you guys are more than welcome to shoot your questions because that's what makes this live stream special and different from the video that I put out yesterday. Plus, I just love chatting with you guys. But at the last half hour, so that's going to be 11 a.m. Japan time, it's going to be a free for all. We can talk about anything. You can ask me about my cat. You can ask me about why I'm wearing a red kippa instead of a black kippa. I don't know, just anything you want to talk about. But yeah, let's go ahead and take a quick look at your comments already. Let's see. Earl's daughter, no problem. Take it. Glenn Most here. Good morning, Glenn. Bam, here in Bandung, Indonesia. Hopefully, I said that right. Let me know if I said that right. Is it Bandung, Indonesia? And then I have Aaron. Aaron, shalom. Good to have you all. All right. So, like I mentioned earlier, this video is going to be specifically talking about the topic that we spoke about in my previous video, which was the temple, the sacrifice, and the high priest. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because there is so much. When I was researching for this, this topic has been in my mind for a while. And when I say a while, I'm talking about a couple of years. And it's one of the things that has allowed me to become stronger personally in this walk. But I went extra hard in the past couple of weeks studying for this, and my mind was just going off. I was talking to my wife, and I knew that I was kind of blabbering because I was just saying so many things to her that she's like, just a overload of information because there's so much depth in this topic. So, um, let me know also if you already watched that video. Can you let me know in the comments? I want to know who here already watched the video that I put out yesterday. And also, just to let you know, that video, when I filmed it, it was almost half an hour long, but I had to go back and start cutting parts off because I didn't want to make that one too long. For the live stream, it's okay because you're all here and we can chat about it, but I didn't want to make you go to sleep with the other one. Let's see. Virginia says, I watched the video. Very informative. Thank you. I made it on time for the live stream. Yes, Virginia, thank you so much for watching it. And Dr. Gemini Reaction also watched it. So that's good. Alma has not seen it yet, but don't worry. If you have not seen it, I'm going to link it to this video. So if you're part of this live stream right now, remember, you're going to be in the live stream. Your questions are going to be here. Uh, but the other video is already there. Of course, you can always comment there as well. But let's begin. Just talking about what I spoke about in that video. The reason why this is such a big topic for me, it's because it's a sensitive topic, but it's also a very impactful topic in this walk. And for anyone who believes in the real God, creator of the universe, the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, the God that created the world, if you believe in him, you are gonna have to address this point at some time in your life, I'm assuming. So it's all about the sacrificial system. And the reason why it was so big, it's because it created this specific topic creates a fork in the road of traditional um it's hard to say. I don't even know if to call it Judaism because I don't know if it was called Judaism before the time of the destruction of the temple. It was just the faith of the God of Israel. So back in those times, they didn't actually, you know what? If I look into the Mishnah, I don't even see the word Judaism anywhere, which is an interesting point. So when a lot of people think of Judaism as we see it today, a lot of people think it's a 3,000-year-old religion or more. But if you really look into it, the Judaism that we see nowadays is probably 1,900 years old, maybe more than that, because it's always been evolving. And if we look at writings such as the Mishnah, which wasn't compiled till it's assumed to be the third century, second century, by who was it? Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, which means Yehuda the prince. He was the one who actually ended up compiling the Mishnah because the Jewish people were going through a lot of persecution, and to make sure that the history wasn't erased, he worked on compiling the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is what we know as the base of the Talmud. So let's go ahead and look. Let me see if you guys have any questions for me right now. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. Earl's Daughter. I ordered The Way of Life by Toby Janicki. Oh yeah, great. Thanks to you, it arrived just an hour ago. I'm so excited uh, of just reading or yeah, reading the forward. Yeah, you know what? That book is great. There's a lot of interesting history, and I think the Didache, which is what this The Way of Life is based on, is really important for any believer in Yeshua, especially anyone that's coming in from a Gentile background, because that's who it was addressed to. Let's see what else. Aaron says, only saw a little bit of it. I got interrupted by the family. You know what? It happens. I completely understand. Julius, Eduardo, hey, what's going on? Shalom, shalom. Boker Tov. Good to have you here. Glenn says, a beautiful video, watched it. My question, how many color variations of that shirt do you have? Hey, you know what? I like this shirt, okay? And I have a couple. They're really cheap, they're affordable, they feel comfortable, and even though they're long sleeve, they're not super hot, which is perfect because here in Japan, it's not only hot, it's so muggy. If you've ever been to the southern part of the United States, like where I used to live, it was hot and it was muggy because it was by the coast. But here it's the worst I've ever faced in my life. Literally, you walk out the door, even if you just took a shower, it feels like somebody threw a bucket of water at you. So I don't know how many variations of colors I have, but I have a couple. Um, let's see. All right, so no new comments now. Oh, look at that. Right now we have 17 people. If you have any friends, let them know. Hey, join because it's going to be awesome. So, yes, let's go back to the topic. So, uh, talking about old Judaism. And like I just said before the temple's destruction, I don't see personally, I don't see any record of the belief in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. I don't see any record of that being called Judaism. If you have a source, please let me know. I know that obviously, as we know, it's called Judaism because it's the religion of the Jews, which come from the tribe of Yehuda. So Yehuda, Yehudim, and then we have Judaism. But I don't see any sources that are, from the first century saying Judaism. So please let me know. Let's see. MS says Bali is also very humid, like very humid. Yes, it is very humid over there. Marsha, so you mean to tell me that there are places hotter than Texas? Yeah, this place is hot. I'm telling you, it's really crazy. It's really bad. But the winters are nice. And it also depends. You got to think about the fact that Japan is a really big country in terms of its length. It's not really wide, but it's like the shape, it looks like a dragon actually if you look at it. And then the north, it's very, very cold. And then in the south, it's tropical pretty much. Glenn, I have a question about the Didache, though. Is it okay? Of course, you can ask questions about all of this stuff because we're talking about early Judaism right now in the sacrificial system. One section of it, it said, gather every Sunday. Is it true? Or did I read the wrong translation? No, this is not incorrect. All right. So this is very important to remember. Back, we're talking about when the belief in Messiah Yeshua began. This is we're talking first century. This is after Yeshua's resurrection. Sunday is still an important day. I know that a lot of people that come into the Messianic world or that go into the Hebrew roots movement um, become extremely anti anything Christian and thus cancel off anything. Sunday, that sun worship, that's not what it is. Because first of all, in early Judaism, the word Sunday doesn't exist. First of all, Sunday is an English word which means Sunday, Sunday. But that's not what it was called in Hebrew. In Hebrew, it's the first day. We have the first day, second day, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and Sabbath. And also, the sixth day was also called the day of preparation. So you'll notice that in the book of Lucas or the book of Luke, that the day before Shabbat is considered the day of preparation because because you prepare for Shabbat. But Sunday is an important day for believers in Yeshua because that is the day in which Yeshua resurrected. So it has nothing to do with sun worship. And if you let's say you're coming in from a Christian background, and this is the blanket statement. Please don't get offended by this, but a lot of people that come into Messianic Judaism immediately cancel off anything that seems Christian and then say Sunday is sun worship. But we know that that is the day when Messiah resurrected, which is why the people gathered to break bread. And when we're talking about breaking bread, it is the same thing that we do in Shabbat. So, in Shabbat, if you celebrate Erev Shabbat, which is the ceremony that begins Shabbat, you know that we have the bread and the wine. That's Jewish tradition that has been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. So, as a believer in Messiah, we know that the bread is the body of Yeshua, that the wine is the blood of Yeshua. And Yeshua told us to do this in remembrance of him, just the same way that we celebrate Pesach yearly to remember the Exodus from Egypt. We also, as believers in Yeshua, celebrate it in regards to our deliverance from the world of sin and from being apart from God and from the separation and salvation from eternal death. Um, we celebrate Pesach, and the same way we celebrate Shabbat, we should also be remembering Yeshua by doing the bread and the wine, breaking bread and wine. So, yes, simple question, simple answer. No, it's not bad. No, you didn't read it wrong. And yes, Sunday is still important for us. Let's go to the questions. Dr. Gemini reactions hotter than Miami, Florida. Sheesh. Actually, you know what? When I went to Florida, it was like during fall time and it felt amazing. So I don't remember how hot it was because at that point it felt really, really nice compared to here. Uh, Chan Noel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right or wrong. So Chan Noel, if I'm saying it right, give me a thumbs up. If I'm saying it wrong, give me a thumbs down. Shalom from Michigan. Daniel Lizardo says the temple is important topic to study. A high percentage of the commandments are related to it. We must study it. Absolutely. Let's jump back to the topic. So the temple, it is important. And according to the numbered amount of commandments that we see coming from Torah, is 613 commandments. I'm sure most of you know this. So the amount of commandments in the Torah is 613. Of course, that's one way of counting it. Some people don't count it as that high because of the fact that some of them are two commandments that are technically the same thing. One's just a positive version of it, and one's a negative version of it. I'll give you an example. Um, the Shema lets us know that our God, He is the one God, right? but it also tells us to not have any other gods. So in that looks like two different commandments, but in reality it's the same thing. It's just two different sides of the same commandment, letting us know that we worship this one God and there is no one else beside him. So that's why we don't worship other gods. I hope that makes sense. So, but if you go by the 613 commandments, it's been said that I believe about 100 or so of the commandments are specifically for the temple. And it's extremely important, not just because of knowing about purity laws or sacrificial laws, but because of what the actual sacrificial system means. And this is the important thing about the sacrificial system. A lot of people, when they think about it and they think about the temple, they think immediately of the Levitical priesthood, which was actually put there as a placeholder for the original form of priesthood, which is what we know as the Melchizedek priesthood, or Melchizedek, I think is how you say it in English. But the Melchizedek priesthood is the one that was there before the Levitical priesthood. The Bible tells us that this is a priesthood without time, which is what let me personally to believe that this priesthood that was instead it was put there by God Himself is the eternal priesthood. As we know, everything that we see on earth in regards to the temple, as we see in Exodus, in Shemot chapter 30, is a mirror image of what we see in heaven. God told Moshe, build the tabernacle according to the pattern shown to you. So when I read that, I'm thinking like a blueprint, like Moshe saw a blueprint, or he saw something, God revealed something to him that is in the heavenly realm, the spiritual realm, and then he builds the tabernacle here on earth according to that pattern. So, in the same way that there is that temple, if you will, in heaven, we also have a sacrificial system, a priesthood that has a heavenly form. That's why we also read in the Brit Hadashah that it tells us that Yeshua is the lamb that was slain before the foundations of the earth. And if we think about that, that sounds a little bit crazy because we think Yeshua was sacrificed for us 2,000 years ago. Yet we see a verse that tells us that it was before the creation of the world, basically. Um, One way to understand this is the fact that we need to remember that God is immaterial, He is timeless, and He is not bound by our space time continuum. So imagine space time, the continuum being here, and it's outside of God. So while we look at time as a linear thing, to God who is outside of it all, it's all one instant. It's all a now, which is why God's holy name means the eternal one, the I am. He calls himself the I am, not just necessarily the I was and I will be. That's for us. I was and will be. But in reality, he is the I am because he just is, and he is outside of time and space. So when we talk about the priesthood, when we talk about the Levitical system, and all of these things, we're able to understand it in a deeper way, realizing that it is apart from just uh, from what we see in the physical realm. There's something greater. All right, let's look back at these questions and see what you guys have going on. Da, 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 da. Nomadic Hebrew says, I have been trying to figure out the Discala Apostolium. Have you read it? I don't know. Are you talking about the Didache? I think that's the same thing, but you're saying it in a way that looks Latin to me. So it might be the same thing as the Didache. But the Didache was written in Greek. The title that you're giving me right now, it sounds literally almost like the same thing. Didascala Apostolorum, which from what I can tell, means the same thing as the Didache, which is the teaching of the apostles to the 12, the teaching of the 12 apostles to the Gentiles. So maybe it's that. Let me know if I'm correct or not. Glenn says, now my question about the video. I'm curious about the crimson string. Can you explain it and what is the purpose of it? Great question. So in the temple, this is something that you can find in the Talmud, where first of all, like I said before, the Talmud is first you have the Mishnah, which is the oral traditions written down. It includes oral traditions and judgments that were made by the High Court, the Beit Din Hagadol. On top of that, you have the Gemara, which is basically the interpretation of that. And then on top of that, you have other parts of it, which are basically allegory and folklore, and extra commentaries and debates between rabbis. But that whole piece of writing, which is like an onion because you have all of these different layers, that whole piece is the Talmud. So in the Talmud, when you go to tractate Yoma 39b, you are able to see the story of it was Rabbi Shimon. No, who was it? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, which was a rabbi, very important rabbi right there in that time, during the time of Yeshua. And this specific period was under the tenure of Rabbi Shimon Hatzadik. So this whole thing about the crimson string, there were a couple of rituals that were done to find out if God had indeed accepted the Yom Kippur sacrifice. So when we read here in the Talmud, it's telling us the history of this. So a couple of things that were done to verify if God did accept the sacrifice. As we know from the written Torah, there was a goat that was sent out into the wilderness. This was called the goat for Azazel. Um, on that goat that would be sent away, there was a crimson wool string that was tied on the head, like around the horns of the goat when it was sent out. There was that crimson string. There's other sources, I haven't been able to find it, but say that a similar crimson string was tied to the gate of the Beit HaMikdash, to the temple. And both of these wool crimson strings would turn white if God had accepted the sacrifice. In the similar way, there were lots that were cast. I don't want to say it's like dice, but similar in that sense. Lots would be cast, and whatever the priest would grab on his right hand, it would say for God if it was accepted. And if it didn't land on his right hand, that means that God didn't accept the sacrifice done on Yom Kippur. And from what we can tell in history, there must have been years that did land on the right hand and some that didn't. But what is very clear to see right here in Tractate Yoma 39b, it tells us that after, so 40 years before the temple was destroyed, which is during the time that Yeshua began his ministry, this is so crazy. At that point, never again did the lot for God end up in the right hand of the priest. No longer did the crimson wool that was tied to the head of the goat turn white. And on top of that, the gates at the temple would open themselves on their own. And it tells us, that's what it tells us also in the Talmud. It tells us about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He rebuked the gates, telling them that, I know you're going to be destroyed, but the destruction hasn't come yet. So why are you panicking? And that was because there was another rabbi that had made a prophecy about the fact that the temple would be destroyed and all of this. You find it right there in the same part in Yoma 39b. But it's crazy that ever since Yeshua stepped into the scene, no longer were the sacrifices accepted. And this is what makes it crazy. The Talmud is a pretty much anti-Yeshua writing in the sense that this is something that is debated, so just hold on and bear with me. But there are mentions of this character called Yeshu. One of them that sounds an awful lot like Yeshua of Nazareth, and I think actually one of them is called Yeshu the Nazarene. But both of them are written in different times than when Yeshua actually existed. One of them is like hundreds of years before Yeshua, and the other one is hundreds of years after Yeshua. So, because of that, we don't really know if it's talking about the same Yeshua or not. But in any case, it mentions. But the reason why I say it's anti-Yeshua is because they're not trying to promote Yeshua in the Talmud in a positive light. So it's interesting to see that the Talmud itself would recognize that 40 years before the destruction of the temple, something happened that made it that the sacrifices were no longer accepted. If you talk to rabbis now why the destruction of the temple happened, they will tell you this. This is another amazing, crazy thing. Ask rabbis why the temple was destroyed, and that they'll tell you that it's because of unbased or unsanctioned hatred against a brother. So basically, it was hate without cause that caused the temple to be destroyed. This is what rabbis would tell you now. They'll say that it has to do hatred between the Jewish people, but if you think about this, let's look at it all together. Even if you don't believe in Yeshua, just look at the interesting facts here. When Yeshua steps into the scene and his ministry begins, the temple sacrifices are no longer accepted. And now the rabbis tell us that the reason why this temple was destroyed was because of on uh, unbased. How can I say that? It's really hard. You know what I'm trying to say? There was no reason for the hatred that was given. And as we believers in Yeshua recognize, Yeshua was really hated without a specific reason. The leaders would say that he was being blasphemous or he was just teaching something that was different to them. Yeshua was basically putting a challenge against the authorities, the rabbinic authorities of the time. So, because he was presenting this challenge and so many people were turning to Yeshua, the leadership was naturally gonna be alarmed by this, and this is what happened. So they would look to make Yeshua look bad at any point. And of course, mob mentality, as we can see pretty clearly nowadays, if you look at the news, mob mentality is nothing new. So back then, if you hear all of your leaders saying that there's this crazy Jew going out here against the grain and teaching this radical message, everybody's gonna want to be like, yeah, why is he talking like this? Who is his teacher? Who taught him? Why is he teaching in his own authority? It was basically on-based hatred against Yeshua. So yeah, they're right when the rabbis tell us that that's the reason why the temple was destroyed. Because, well, number one, because that system was going back to the original. So the Levitical priesthood was being removed, and the one that was being placed again was the Melchizedek priesthood. But also because there was this hatred against the Messiah of God. So the scriptures tell us, Yeshua himself tells us that throughout history, our people, the people of Israel, were always going against the prophets and even killing some of the prophets or just going against the messengers of God. And the same way they treated Yeshua with this hatred and with this bias, so much so that even today, many rabbis and many Talmidim, many of the disciples of modern day rabbis, hate Yeshua. And I'm not talking about dislike or disapprove, I'm talking about real hate. If you go, for example, to I think it's in Haifa or a specific neighborhood right there in Israel, the people are so anti-Yeshua that if you go in there as a Messianic Jew, as a Christian, any type of believer in Yeshua, they're just gonna attack you, calling you a missionary and calling you all types of different names, and drive you out of the city. So that hate still exists. This is for specific people. Not all Jews hate Christians. Not all Jews hate Messianic believers or believers in Yeshua. All right, let me go back to the questions. But I hope that answers the whole thing about the crimson wool thing. I know that I went off in a little bit of a tangent, but I hope that helps. Let's see, where else are we? Okay, Jenny Rodriguez asks, can you explain the significance of the physical temple in the new heavens and the new earth? I'm confused about it. So let's go back all the way back before the Levitical priesthood. If we look at Abraham, when he meets Melchizedek, which is also considered the king of Shalem, which it's another way of saying Shalom, we see that this man was given a specific priesthood. We see in the Psalms that this priest was a priest without beginning. We see the same thing in the Brit Hadashah, in the book of Hebrews, that Melchizedek is. This is what he's called. Melchizedek means our king of righteousness, and it talks about the fact that this king was, or this priest comes from a priesthood without beginning, and that is a priesthood without end. So the sacrificial system, which is what the Torah talks about, it doesn't end and it doesn't change. The priesthood itself can change, but the system doesn't, which is why even now the blood sacrifices matter. So this is why I addressed this in my video, the fact that if you don't have Yeshua, you don't have a sacrificial system. There are some Jews, and I know this because I used to live in Brooklyn, that would sacrifice chickens in Yom Kippur. This is nowhere in Torah, but this is something that the rabbis in this specific place, I don't know where else they do this, but I know that they did this in Brooklyn, where I used to live. They sacrifice chickens for Yom Kippur because of the fact that they recognize the fact that we do still need blood sacrifices. Unfortunately, what they're doing does not come from Torah. What we see through Yeshua is because we're talking about a specific priesthood that is ancient, more ancient than the Levitical system. So when we're talking about the temple, to address your question, Jenny, as I understand it, there is supposed to be a temple later in the future. But the sacrifices that we see that are going to be there, because it does mention that the temple will be there, I believe are going to continue under this Melchizedek priesthood. The Levitical system, I don't think it will ever return because uh, it, it wasn't what was intended. As a matter of fact, rabbis will tell you that if the Israelites had never worshipped the golden calf, the Levites will have never become priests. This is what the rabbis tell us. And I actually agree with that. I agree because the original system was under the priesthood of the Melchizedek priesthood. So, what will happen when Yeshua returns, when the Messiah is here and there is a temple? He continues that priesthood, and under that priesthood we are delivered from sin already. So the sacrifices for sins will no longer be there in the sense of slaughtering animals like what we see now. It's through him, because we are covered under his righteousness, his kingdom, his priesthood. So while we don't know all the details of how it will be, we can definitely come to a pretty good guess by saying the fact that the Levitical system won't be there. The animal sacrifices as they used to be done won't be there either. I know that doesn't fully answer everything, but we don't have the full details, and I'm not an expert in that field. But just from what I've been able to study, I can tell you this: no more Levitical system. Priesthood continues through Yeshua. And since it will be a time of shalom and peace, I'm assuming that it's also going to be a time in which people are going to be walking in the ways of Messiah and not in the ways of God, and no longer being led by the flesh, or what we know in Judaism as the Yetzer Hara. All right, let's continue. Aaron, answering Glenn, Ecclesiastic speaks of a silver cord or string. I'm not sure what that is. I'll have to take a look. The Nomadic Hebrew says, so I understand the Didache is included in some Didaskala Apostolorum manuscripts, but not all. Okay, so they are related. Interesting. Jenny then goes, and the curtain was torn in half after Yeshua died. Exactly. So there's so many things that happen that are just completely undeniable, that when Yeshua stepped into the scene, Judaism changed. He was not just any man. And I know this is what a lot of rabbis will tell you. Yeah, Yeshua was not the only man making miracles. Yeshua was not the only person claiming to be the Messiah. Yeah, I agree with that. But none of them split history like Yeshua did. You can't tell me that there's not something special. Even if you don't believe in Yeshua, you gotta be honest. No more temple, no more sacrifice, no more priest. The veil was torn, and all of these things that are just, they're extra biblical facts. This is something that we can see through with our own eyes. We don't even need to go back to look at archaeology itself. We just go to Israel right now, there is no temple. We go to Israel right now, there is no priesthood. Even though right now, if you guys are at all aware with the Temple Institute, if you know about the Temple Institute, these are a couple of people that are trying to train people that they assume are from the Levitical lineage. They're training them to be priests. They even try to do sacrifices. Man, this just reminded me of something. Look at how crazy this is. Right now, these men, which are part of the Temple Institute, they're training to be priests according to the Levitical order. They tried to set up, I think it was last year, they tried to set up an altar to perform a sacrifice. When they try to do this, they lit the fire at the altar. Whew, the wind blows it away. They try to light it again. It gets blown again. They try to do it again and it gets blown again. It's as if God was clearly telling them this system and this priesthood is no longer necessary. Because even though we still need the sacrificial system, the Levitical priesthood is no longer the one that God is taking sacrifices from. It comes from the Melchizedek priesthood. And this is crazy. Like, if we look at it in an honest way, we're able to see that there is so much evidence that has nothing to do with the Bible. It has nothing to do with interpretation. How else can you interpret the fact that the temple is not there? It's just not there. It doesn't matter if you agree or not with Yeshua, it's not there. And we look at now the story that I'm telling you right now. You can even go on YouTube and look at this. The Temple Institute, they made an altar, they tried to light it up, and God just wasn't having it. He was literally blowing the fire off so that the sacrifice would not be given. At the end, they persisted and they ended up lighting it. But as we see in the book of Romans, sometimes God will just let people go in their ways when they just continue sinning in rebellion. And this is the same thing that I see. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound rough against my Jewish brethren, but let's look at the facts. If you try to light this fire and God keeps turning it off, there's something going on here. Let's continue. Glenn says, thanks, Aaron. Thank you guys for communicating down there. You guys are awesome. Alma says, wow. Yes, wow. Oh, and Ecclesiastes 26:6. You know what? Let me just go to it right now. Okay, and it's chapter 12, verse 6. And I'm reading from this one right here, the Complete Jewish Bible. You guys had asked me before which translation I use, so this is the one that I'm using right now. Let's read about the silver cord and see if it is related. So let's go back. Let's go back a couple of verses. When they will be afraid and go up, I'm going from verse 5. When they will go up to, what? When they will be afraid and go up a hill, the tares will stalk the way. Even though the almond tree is in blossom, when the locust can only drag itself along, and the copperberry has no aphrodisiac effect, because the person is headed for his eternal home. And the mourners are already gathering in the marketplace. Before the silver cord is snapped, the bowl of gold is cracked, the pitcher is shattered in the spring, the pulley is broken at the cistern, and dust returns to earth. Oh, this is actually something different. That's not talking about the cord that I'm talking about, the one that was tied on the horns of the scapegoat. But it's really good, and thank you for sharing that. Glenn says, wow, they're actually lucky that God didn't send a fiery judgment just like Aaron's son. You're absolutely right. It's crazy. It's crazy that they offered this and God didn't just destroy it. But I think God works in a very specific way. And this message is so much louder to us that believe in Yeshua. Because think about it this way. Imagine a pillar of cloud descended and consumed those people. that would give a horrible image of who God is. Think about it. We know that God is a loving God and a God of mercy. By blowing the wind with the wind, just gently turning the fire off, it's like saying to, like a father to a little child, hey, don't stop, don't do it, don't do it. That's kind of like what it was. Versus if God descended and just burned them all, it'll be kind of scary and everybody will be like, okay, this God is scary, I don't want to get close to him. So that's, I mean, that's just my opinion. I think that God doing it that way was a gentle way of letting us know he doesn't like it, that specific thing that they were doing, offering the sacrifice. He doesn't approve of it, but in a gentle way. Let's continue. Daniel says, "Brother, have you seen Rico Cortez's teaching, especially in this topic? He really has good teachings about temple study." I once saw one video that he put out in Spanish, but um, I'm not really familiar with any of his work, to be honest with you. And I'm not familiar. We talked about this before in the last live stream. I'm actually not super familiar with teachers from the Hebrew roots movement. I don't know if he still considers himself that, but from what I had heard, he is part of the Hebrew roots movement. And I'm not really familiar with any teachers of that. But from the one that I saw, that teaching was pretty cool. He does have a lot of good points. Maybe I'll take a look. So if you have a specific video, you can send it to me through Instagram. And if you don't know, my Instagram is at Messianic Me TV. Let's keep looking. Sola Scriptura Ministry is here. Will future sacrifices be for memorial, or will they be an act for actual atonement during the millennial reign? So, as I mentioned before, we don't have full details of what sacrifices will be like. So I know that we see this in a prophecy. If I'm not mistaken, it's in the book of Zechariah or Zechariah, where it mentions the fact that all the nations will come for the feast of Sukkot or tabernacles. They will come to Jerusalem, and they will all gather. But it doesn't say what kind of sacrifices. If anything, it might just be like a Thanksgiving sacrifice. But no, for a fact, it won't be for atonement, because the atonement is Yeshua. The Brit Hadashah, now this is specifically for believers in Yeshua. If you believe the Brit Hadashah, it tells us specifically that Yeshua was a sacrifice that is done once and for all, which is why, like what we looked at before, the scriptures also tell us that Yeshua was the lamb that was slain before the creation of the world, before the beginning, if you will, of time. So this sacrifice of Yeshua has nothing to do with time itself, like, oh, 2,000 years and now the sacrifice is valid. It's anyone who believes that God is their salvation and that puts their trust in God as their Yeshua or their salvation, then that sacrifice applies to you in that sense. So in the future, if we're still believing that Yeshua was that sacrifice, which obviously we would be, then at that point, those type of atonement animal sacrifices won't exist. Even Shaul tells us, I believe Shaul is the author of the book of Hebrews, just as a heads up. Um, in the book of Hebrews, it tells us that this Levitical system, I mean, this Levitical priesthood for the sacrificial system is taken away, and the Melchizedek priesthood is reinstated. So that lets us know that the Levitical sacrifices, what we see in the Levitical system, it's no longer there. The Nomadic Hebrew. I have been to some other live streams. Would it help you if we put question before asking one? Just to put it, just a thought. It might help out. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you guys can definitely leave questions, like, or like if a question is headed specifically towards me and it's not just you guys communicating again amongst each other. Yeah, I guess if you could put Q for question or something like that, I'll know that it's specifically for me. So yeah, thank you. That's a good suggestion. This is only my second live stream, so I'm not really good at this. I'm still nervous. I still feel like I'm all over the place. So I'm sorry, everyone. I'm not like an expert live streamer. So even right now, as I'm talking, I feel like I'm a little bit shaky and nervous. But yeah, let's continue. The nomadic Hebrew, other ones from others use that. Yeah. Glenn, question. Hey, what is your opinion about the building of the third temple? Will it actually happen? Everybody can see that they made the menorah already. If the third temple is built the way that the rabbis want to build it, it doesn't make anything. Let me tell you something, man. You know what? This leads me to something very important, and I hope you're all listening carefully right now because this is super important. If the temple were to be rebuilt, there are some people, uh, some folks in the Messianic Jewish movement, some people in the Hebrew roots movement that say, if the temple is back, yeah, I'm gonna go there and offer sacrifices. And they say that the only reason why they're not offering sacrifices is because the temple is not there anymore. This is a horrible thing to say because, like I just mentioned and what I mentioned in my video before, it's not that the temple alone was removed. It's not only that the Levitical high priest was removed. It's not just that the sacrifices were removed. It's that the whole Levitical priesthood was removed and the Melchizedek priesthood is now reinstated. So if the temple comes back, we are not offering sacrifices according to the Levitical system. We see this in the book of Hebrews, and I would invite everyone to go back and study this with this understanding. The fact that the priesthood was removed. The system wasn't. The sacrificial system is still important to God. That's why we have Yeshua as our sacrifice, as our Pesach lamb, as the sacrifice that goes beyond all sacrifices. Yeshua is not a sacrifice made after the Levitical system or the Levitical priesthood. That's a confusion that a lot of people make. Yes, he is our Pesach lamb, but this is a type of sacrifice that goes beyond the Levitical priesthood. This is the Melchizedek priesthood, the original, the never ending priesthood. The Levitical priesthood was only put there as a buffer or as a placeholder until we go back to the original. So if the temple is reinstated, we are not to go there and offer sacrifices. Now there is a very high chance that this temple could be built. And if it is built, remember what the scriptures tell us, that there will be, once again, just like in the book of Daniel, it talks about the abomination of desolation that is in the temple. That could be taken in as a literal sense, but it could also be in a spiritual sense. So the temple does not necessarily physically have to be rebuilt for that prophecy to take place. It just has to do with us, because remember that our bodies become temples or a home for the Ruach HaKodesh, for the Spirit of God to indwell in us. So technically, we're all like little temples walking around in that sense. Just like Yeshua, who was physical, of course, but the Ruach HaKodesh was within him because he is God, because he's God revealed in the flesh. Because of that fact, he was the new temple. But when Yeshua ascends back into the spiritual heavenly realm, we here are given the blessing of the Ruach HaKodesh, and God indwells in us. So, for that abomination of desolation to be completed, for that prophecy to become reality, it doesn't have to just be a physical temple in the sense of the one that we used to have 2,000 years ago. It would just have to be us denying God and being once temples to the Ruach HaKodesh. We are now turning back into the ways of wickedness and turning against God. That alone, right there, is the abomination of desolation. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. We're seeing people trying to replace Yeshua with other systems, whether it be with them believing that their works alone are what gives them the righteousness. Obviously, we're supposed to still be obedient to God and follow Torah and follow the commandments and instructions as He has guided us to. But our works alone are not what make us righteous. And a lot of people nowadays are starting to believe that, as they discover Torah, they become so passionate about it that they become these type of people that believe that their works are what make them fully righteous, and they forsake the sacrifice of Yeshua. And in this temple that we are, the body, this temple, the sacrifice that is within us, the blood that is here is the blood of Yeshua. The blood of Yeshua is what is supposed to indwell in us. Remember what Yeshua said in the book of Yohanan, the book of John, chapter 6. His body, that bread, is the sacrifice. His blood is the sacrifice that reinstates the new covenant, and that is the sacrifice that indwells with us. So when we do the bread and the wine, whether you do it on Shabbat or Sunday or whenever you do it, Yeshua said, whenever you do it in remembrance of him, because that is our sacrifice. Yeshua is our sacrifice. Sorry, again, I'm going into a tangent, but I hope that I'm making it clear in understanding that if that temple came back, we're not going back to that system. Dr. Gemini Reactions, you're doing great and you're on point. Hey, glory to Abba, and thank you so much. Thank you for your support. You're all like a family to me here, and I appreciate you being patient with me and being so kind and for communicating and being, just part of the family. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for taking your time and being here. Let's see what else we have. Alma says, give a brief description of the Melchizedek priesthood. So the brief description is this. And I spoke about it a little bit before. We can see the first mention of it in the book of Genesis, in the book of Bereshit, where Abraham goes and he meets the king of Shalem, Melchizedek. Shalem is another way of saying shalom, which means peace and wholeness. And Melchizedek means king of righteousness, our king of righteousness. So Abraham goes to this king after Abraham conquers a lot of land and gets all these riches, and he gives 10% of what he got to Melchizedek, and they do the breaking of bread and wine right there. Like how perfect is this? That we see that this sacrifice from this priesthood is bread and wine. Go back to that. Please read it in the book of Bereshit. I don't remember the exact chapter right now, but they do a sacrifice of bread and wine, which is what we do now through Yeshua. He tells us the bread is his body, the wine is his blood, and we do this in remembrance of him. So in this Melchizedek priesthood, we see that Abraham Avinu, or Abraham, he gives 10% of the riches that he gained to Melchizedek. We see that he partakes of the bread and wine. We see a later mention of it in the book of Tehillim, in the book of Psalms, where David, he speaks about Melchizedek being a man without beginning. We see it mentioned again in the book of Hebrews, where it tells us that this priesthood of Melchizedek, and the reason why I want to point out that it's mentioned in the book of Hebrews, even if I know that it's super important to make sure that we're basing this off Torah and that we also see it in the writings, but it's so important because we can understand that since it's being mentioned by Shaul, we're talking first century here, we know that he's not the only one who knew about the Melchizedek priesthood. This is something that was known. So anybody that was listening to this message, and remember, the book of Hebrews is targeted exactly to the people of Israel, the Jews that were believers, that wanted to understand, hey, what's going to happen with the priesthood? Yeah, we might accept that Yeshua is the Messiah, but what happens with the priesthood? The book of Hebrews is trying to make the point that the priesthood that is now is the priesthood that was before. So in between, the placeholder was the Levitical priesthood, but the book of Hebrews lets us know that the original and intended priesthood that God had established was the Melchizedek priesthood. And in the same way that Abraham partook of bread and wine, we partake of bread and wine as well. So tie it all together, Abraham, the book of Tehillim, the book of Hebrews, and then tie it all together with when we partake of the bread and the wine, and tie it all with the book of Yohanan, the book of John in chapter 6. It all ties together beautifully. So if you get anything out of this specific topic, read through all of these things, study them hard, and maybe we can converse about it in a later live stream. But I think that that's a really important topic to talk about. All right, everyone. So right now we've hit the 1 hour mark. So now the questions are a free for all. We can continue. I'm going to continue with the questions that you have already posted. But now the live stream is open for any questions at all that you may have. Again, I want to stress this point. I am not some know it all. I don't even like calling myself a teacher. Um, I speak on what I know according to my experiences, through what I've learned, through my research. I don't claim a voice for all of Messianic Judaism. I don't claim a voice for all Jews. I claim a voice from my own experience. So please understand that as you ask me questions, I don't know everything about every topic, and if I can't answer your question, I'm just gonna tell you straight up. But I'll do my very best to be able to answer. So any questions are valid. Let's go back, and I'm gonna just answer your questions at this point. Um, so yeah, Alma, I hope that description of the Melchizedek priesthood answers your question. It's a priesthood that is not bound by time because it's established by God. It's the original priesthood within the sacrificial system. So we know that according to the book of Vayikra, if we look in the book of Leviticus, in chapter 17, verse 11, it tells us about the importance and the meaning of blood for atonement. It's always been that way. Um, but the Levitical system came in after when Torah was given to the people of Israel, and we see that in the book of Vayikra. Let's see. Valid core. Daniel seems to imply the sacrifices will be there to wait. Daniel seems to imply the sacrifices will be there to be stopped by the Antichrist when he comes. He's the final sacrifice, and God lines up with Second Thessalonians also. I'm not sure if I'm understanding 100%, but from what I think you're saying is that um, when if there is another temple and then the Antichrist or the Sheker HaMashiach comes, that the sacrifices that will be offered there will be by the Antichrist, the Sheker HaMashiach, the anti-Messiah. So, I mean, it could be like if the temple is reinstated, like I said before, if the actual temple physically is built and somebody starts offering these sacrifices, we cannot fall for that trap because we have Yeshua, the eternal priest, the high priest. Yeshua is our temple, Yeshua is our sacrifice, and Yeshua is our priest. I think this is why the Brit Hadashah is so specific, saying that it's very possible that even the elect will fall away from the truth, because I can already see it. People are going to be like, hey, the temple is back. Now we can make sacrifices again. That will come if we don't understand the fact that we are not under the Levitical priesthood. We're under the priesthood of Melchizedek, that priesthood, the priesthood which Yeshua is the eternal high priest. So please remember that. Please keep in mind that that is who we belong to. So yes, so if the temple is rebuilt and there are sacrifices being offered, that is most likely going to be done under the priesthood of the anti-Mashiach. So it's very good point. Thank you, Valid Core, for mentioning that. The Nomadic Hebrew says, yeah, you're doing great. I just like to help, and I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Sola Scriptura Ministry says, First Fruits of Zion has a wonderful book called What About the Sacrifices? Is a fascinating read. I'll take a look. I like a lot of the content from First Fruits of Zion. I don't approve with all of their theology, especially when they make it such like a really hard division from what I see between Jews and Gentiles, and I don't believe that that separation should exist. But otherwise, I love their stuff. I love the book, The Way of Life, that I'm looking at right now. I'm looking right now also at the first steps in Messianic Jewish prayer. I'm looking also at my Shulchan Shabbat, which is the Siddur for Shabbat. So I love all of the content. I'll go ahead and take a look at that book. I hope it's nice. KT says, do Messianic Jews believe in Jesus as God or just the Messiah? Again, I don't claim a voice for all of Judaism and all of Messianic Judaism. This is just how I understand it. And if you look at my previous posts, I had posted about the fact that Messiah can only be God. Otherwise, if it was just some ordinary man, then this whole thing about the priesthood wouldn't even count. No man could establish the Melchizedek priesthood. This is a priesthood that is not bound by time, and it's not bound by matter and space. This is something way beyond. So, as I believe, Yeshua HaMashiach is God revealed in the flesh. And I don't want to get into this whole Trinitarian doctrines and things like that. I don't use specific vocabulary for very specific reasons, but there is no way around the fact that if really in fact the Messiah that we see in the Brit Hadashah is the real Mashiach, it can only be God Himself, because only God can forgive sins. Only God has the ability to come back to life when, after death in 3 days. Only this Mashiach could establish the Melchizedek priesthood if he is actually God revealed in the flesh. There's so many points that point to that factor. So that's how I believe. Again, I'm not claiming a voice for all Messianic Jewish believers. This is just what I believe. I know that there's plenty others that agree with what I'm saying, but some don't. So I just want to highlight that. Let's see. Lisa Fainley says Shabbat Shalom, or Shabbat Shalom is over, so Shalom. Hey, you could say Shavuot Tov, which means like good week. Yeah, right now for me it's Sunday, 11 a.m. That says Alma says, so symbolically through Yeshua we go back to the Melchizedek priesthood as its foreshadow, and it was foreshadow of Yeshua. So the Melchizedek priesthood through Yeshua is not symbolically taken; it's literally taken up. The Melchizedek priesthood is a real priesthood. So when Yeshua, the Brit Hadashah tells us that Yeshua here sacrificed in the flesh, like he had this flesh suit, as some people call it. Here on earth, when that blood is spilled and Yeshua dies, he is in a spiritual realm, and it tells us now that Yeshua is at the right hand of the Father. It tells us that Yeshua is ascended. It tells us all this because Yeshua in the heavenly realm becomes as high priest, using that same sacrifice that his body was here on earth, and is offered a timeless sacrifice. Again, this is why he's called the Lamb that was slain before the foundations of the earth. So that is not a symbolic priesthood; is the most real priesthood. So I hope that helps. Yeshua brought it back. Yes, Yeshua did bring that back. Daniel Lim says, under the new covenant, is physical circumcision still apply, or is it a type of spiritual circumcision by the Ruach HaKodesh? It is also, is this also refer the Torah being written in our hearts? That's a very good point. As I understand it, anyone read through the book of Acts. Anyone who is not circumcised by the flesh, in other words, who is not Jewish by flesh or Israel by heritage, um, if you come into the faith and you are not circumcised, you don't need to become circumcised. And I'll tell you two reasons why that is. Number one, circumcision was commanded to be done by the parents to the child. So it's not a commandment for the child to circumcise himself, obviously. It's a commandment for the parents to do to the children on the 8th day. That's it. The Torah doesn't command later on for you to circumcise yourself as an adult, and if you come in, it doesn't command that. However, the other thing is the fact that this was a very specific commandment to show who the Israelites were physically. We also know that the Brit Hadashah tells us that whoever is circumcised to remain that way, and whoever is uncircumcised to remain that way also. All this means is that circumcision is another way of saying that you're Jewish or Israelite. But if you're part of the uncircumcision, that is another way of saying that you come from a uh, Gentile background. But when we come to God through Yeshua, we are baptized, as some people would say, or immersed, as some others would say, through the Ruach HaKodesh. We undergo the mikvah process. When we go underwater, we are immersed in water. Uh, so that is like circumcision for us, because it's all about a symbol of saying who belongs to God. So mikvah is a public symbol of saying that you belong to God. Even when you convert to traditional rabbinical Judaism, you have to do mikvah. They also do mikvah. They go immerse themselves in water. So mikvah is nothing new. But when we do it, as Yeshua said, that the people would come to Yeshua and they would be immersed in the name of the Father, in the name of the Son. So in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit. Um, it's letting us know that we are being immersed into God. So we become Israel that way. It doesn't tell us to be circumcised again. I believe that circumcision is a specific symbol for those who were coming in from a Israelite background physically. But through Yeshua, we are circumcised at the heart, which then comes out through our actions and shows us by the way that we live that we belong to God. I hope that makes sense. I don't know if I explained that clearly. Um, let's keep looking. Alma says, thank you. Sola Scriptura again comes in with, when Elohim said, let us make men in our image, since we both do not believe in the Trinity, how do you address the us that is used? I know typical Judaism says that the angels, but they are spirit. So I don't use the term Trinity, but I believe that God is way more complex than we assume. So there is such a thing as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We see this in the Brit Hadashah clearly. Yeshua himself uses that terminology. So while I don't necessarily use that terminology, I do accept that God is more complex than we see while still being one. He is one God. There's no question about this. However, when God says, let's make man in our image, first of all, the angels don't create. So he can't tell to the angels, let's make. And when he says our image, the angels are not in the image of God. We are made in the image of God. Just pointing that out. So who is he talking to? He's talking to himself as the complex God that he is. He is not talking to the angels. He's not talking to the heavenly hosts. Even I used to believe that, but just look at it clearly. It says, let's make. The angels do not create. Therefore, he's talking only to whoever is God. And God is a complex being. I'm not using Trinitarian terminology here, but it's very clear to see that while God is one, he is complex. Hope that helps. Let's keep going. Daniel Lim, how do you see the Ephraim awakening? I am referring to the house of Israel, which was exiled and assimilated to the nations, and Yeshua came for the lost sheep of Israel. I am not part of that two house doctrine. If you know what two house is, I don't know. I don't believe in this because again, it's relying on genetics, on DNA, and all of these things. I don't believe in it. When the scriptures tell us that the northern tribes assimilated into the nations, that's exactly what happened. They were just lost. So if anybody has any trace of those original 12 tribes, of the original 10 tribes, sorry, that DNA is lost. Like it would be impossible because it would be so diluted. It's been millennia since that time of diaspora, the Galuth, that it would be impossible to track down by DNA. So I don't even worry about it. Let's say that maybe you do have some DNA that comes from the house of Ephraim, or the house of Israel versus the house of Yehuda. It doesn't matter. We are not saved because of our salvation. We are not people of God because of our DNA. We are the people of God because we accept him as our God, and because we choose to walk according to his way, because we are immersed in the death of Mashiach through the immersion in water, and we come back to life in him. That's it. Please do not rely on anything that has to do with the flesh for salvation or for communion with God, because the flesh profits us nothing. All right. Katie says, thank you. And Daniel Lizardo, what about the third temple times? huh? What about going to the temple 3 times a year if the temple is rebuilt? As I mentioned in my previous live stream, from what we see in the Brit Hadashah and what the scriptures tell us, all of the feasts and all of Torah, in fact, is supposed to point us to Mashiach, to point to the fact that only God is our salvation through different ways and different meanings. For example, Pesach shows us the importance of the blood that covers us. Sukkot shows us that God dwells with us, Emmanuel. Um, the feast of Pentecost, or as we know it in Hebrew, Shavuot, shows us the power of the Ruach and the giving of the Ruach and the Torah, the instructions that dwell within us. Everything is just pointing to something. So we don't have to migrate to the temple for these feasts. This was before the time of Yeshua because the people of God were there. It was accessible to them. You cannot assume that now the same thing applies, because then that would make God extremely unfair. Let's say you're a believer in some remote part of the Amazon jungle where you don't even have a car, you don't even have a passport, but now you believe that Yeshua is Mashiach. How are you going to get all the way to Jerusalem? It's impossible. Why? Because our sacrifice is Yeshua. And the reason why people had to go to the temple was to offer sacrifices. And again, we are not under the Levitical priesthood. We are under the priesthood of Melchizedek. I know that a lot of people say that when the temple is rebuilt, if it is rebuilt, that they will offer sacrifice. And I'm talking about people that claim to be believers in Messiah Yeshua. And I don't mean any disrespect, but we need to be honest here. Yeshua, if he is indeed the Messiah and he is our high priest, we cannot assume or presume that the Levitical priesthood stands, and that the priesthood, the laws that are specific to the priesthood and the temple still apply. They don't. Make that clear. God has not left us in pending. We haven't been waiting 2,000 years like, oh, the temple will be coming soon. And as soon as it comes back, we're going back to the old. We're not going back to that system. The only thing we went back to is the original system, the Melchizedek priesthood. And I'm sorry if I'm sounding super harsh about this, but I'm saying it because I love you all so much. And I don't want you to fall into this trap of believing that somehow the Levitical priesthood is still valid and operating. It's not operating. The temple isn't there. The high priest isn't there. We're not in that priesthood anymore. Okay, let's continue. Great point about the first fruits of Zion. I was upset finding out that they create the division. They do have good content. Yeah, exactly. While they do have a lot of good content, and like one of the things that I really love about first fruits of Zion is the quality of their content. Like when it comes to like books, they're solid, they're so well made, and that's what I love. But I just don't agree with that specific theology that creates a division between anyone who comes from a Gentile background or an Israel or a Jewish background, because we are one new man in Messiah. Our flesh profits us nothing, and I will always stress that. I don't want anybody who claims to be a believer in Yeshua to cause this division, because we are one in Mashiach. Yeshua himself said before, when he made this prayer towards the Father, he said, "Let them be one as we are one." And that's what we're supposed to be. Not And I know a lot of people say, yeah, we're still one. You just keep Torah this way and you do, and this person does it the other way. That's not what it is. We are one nation, one nation. We are Israel under God. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. Alma says, oh, okay, nomadic Hebrew question. Do you use original language text in your studies? I try to as much as possible. I'm not fluent, just so everybody out there knows. I'm not fluent in Hebrew and Greek. I know some I know some Hebrew, and I keep learning every day. And I say some because Hebrew is like never ending. You can keep studying for the rest of your life, and you'll never fully capture the whole language. And Greek, I know a little bit of that, and I know a little bit of Latin, a little bit of Aramaic. That's it, just a little bit. So I don't claim to like know all these languages completely, but I use Hebrew, and I use Hebrew text, and I use Aramaic, and I use Greek as I study the scriptures, just so I can get a better understanding of certain words and certain things. So yes, and I would actually encourage anyone watching, if you are a follower of Yeshua, if you're a lover of the scriptures, definitely try to learn even a little bit. Just learn the Aleph Bet or something like that. The alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet. It helps a lot. It really does enrich the journey, the walk when you know it. You don't need to know Hebrew to know God, but I feel that you will know the scriptures a little better if you can understand them in their original language. All right. Um Alma Duran says spiritual circumcision. Yes, that's what I mean. Yep, Acts 15 points to that exactly. Sola Scriptura Ministry says, great answer on the complexity of Elohim. I agree 100%. Amen. High five. Whoosh. Glenn says, my understanding is this. When Genesis 1 was written, it was written after the fall of humanity. So that us part is like God's way of telling Moshe that the plan for Messiah is there from the very beginning. What do you say about that? Well, I already explained my view on that. Like I said, God is complex, and he's talking to himself. And, like we know, the Brit Hadashah in the book of Yohanan, chapter 1, it tells us, in the beginning was the Word, and the word was with God, and the Word was God. The same word is the word that when God spoke, everything was created. We see that the Ruach HaKodesh, the Spirit of God, hovered over the waters. It's all God. It's just more complex than what we see. So that's how I believe that. So hopefully that answers that question. Daniel Lim says, can you explain the differences between Hebrew roots movement and Messianic Judaism? I'm not a voice for both movements or either movement, but this is what I personally see it. First, I will advise you to just go look at my video that I posted. What is Messianic Judaism? The first video, I explain it on how I see it. But this is what I see. Both Hebrew roots and Messianic believers believe this. They believe in the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. They believe, or we believe, in the scriptures. So we believe that from the book of Bereshith all the way to the Hitgaluth, which is Genesis, all the way to Revelation. All of that is God breathed scriptures and authoritative in our lives. We both agree that is Torah again. In if you translate it to English, it means instruction. We believe that the instructions that God gives us are the way that we should live out, even though we don't do it for the sake of salvation, which means salvation from sin and from eternal death. We understand that that is the way that God wants us to live. But the biggest difference is that a Messianic Jew like me, for example, I come from Jewish background. Like my family's heritage is Jewish, but I believe that Yeshua is Messiah. Somebody that's in the Hebrew roots movement, most of the time it's coming from a non-Jewish background. Usually it would be like a Christian person that ends up falling in love with Torah, and they really reject the traditions of man. So they become like super anti titles like Christian. They'll hate that title or don't want to have anything to do with the title Christian. Don't want to have to do anything that has to do with Sunday, as we spoke about before. Don't want to have to do with anything that ties you back to the Christian background, and want to do everything Torah. And thus, the Hebrew roots movement, according to what I see it, reject all types of tradition of man. Whereas in Messianic Judaism, we still hold to traditions as long as they're not going against Torah, and they enrich our walk, and we keep certain things just for the sake of tradition because it's part of our heritage. Like, let's say you're Irish, and you have a specific way of cooking, for example. Or if you're Latino and you have a specific way of cooking, we might cook a certain way, or we might wear kippot. This is not a mitzvah. It's not a commandment to wear kippah, but I wear it out of tradition and because it helps me in my walk. And I've explained before why that is. So those are the main differences that I see. But definitely, I would point you to my video, What is Messianic Judaism, where I talked about that. Melise says, can you explain the difference between the evangelical view of heaven and the Messianic era? I don't know what the evangelical view is, because if you mean like the Protestant view of what heaven is, there's so many different branches of Protestantism that I have no idea how I could possibly cover it all. But from my understanding, again, this is my personal experience, um, heaven is a a a place that is far away and different, separated from the physical realm. Heaven is a spiritual realm in which God dwells in his true form. And that, from what I understand, they believe that when we die, and after the judgment, we are in heaven and we're going to be there worshiping God. The Messianic era, according to what I understand it to be, is just the period, the 1,000-year period when Mashiach is here on earth reigning. But then after that, we know about the final judgment, when everyone who is dead will come back to life and everyone is being judged, and we are able to partake in the new heavens and the new earth. So I see the new heavens and new earth as a joining of the physical and spiritual to its true and real meaning, the true way in which God meant it to be, like in Gan Eden, when the Garden of Eden, where it says that God walked in the garden. So there was like this full perfect communion between the physical realm and the spiritual realm. And I believe that's what we're going to go back to. And I believe that's what it's meant by the new heavens and the new earth. Okay, let's see. My understanding is this. Sorry, I keep going down. Sorry, I'm just going through the comments, seeing which one is where I am now. Juliana says, what are your thoughts on the 144,000 from the 12 tribes of Israel in Revelation? If the 10 are lost, how does this manifest? Um, I actually don't know. I can't tell you, to be honest. I've actually never studied. I've heard so many different theories about what the 144,000 actually means. But to be honest with you, I'm not educated enough to tell you what it means. In reality, nobody really knows what it means. Anybody who says they know, they're just giving you their interpretation. Um, so when I look at this and I think about what 144,000 means, I'm thinking that perhaps it's talking about um, a specific form of believers. If I'm not mistaken, it says that those people are going to be virgins. I'm not 100% sure if I remember that correctly. I may be wrong, but it's like a specific type of people within the nations. But I really don't know, to be honest with you. I'm sorry that I can't give you a good answer, but I just don't know, and I don't want to pretend that I do. Okay, so Sola Scriptura Ministry. Also, Sola Scriptura Ministry and Nomadic Hebrew, thank you for all the amazing questions. And I hope that all of you can continue asking questions before we close, because we only have like a minute left. What is your understanding on tongues? It seems to be a language, but Pentecostals take it to mean something different. Well, according to the books in the Brit Hadashah, the letters that we see from Shaul, for example, They let us know that this is a language that is understood. If you look at the book of Acts, it tells us that the believers, when they received the power of the Ruach HaKodesh, they were talking in a way that everybody could understand them in their own language. So I don't know what it sounds like, but we know that everybody understood it in their specific language. Not only that, it tells us that sometimes you could be speaking in a certain language that others won't understand, and that there would be someone else that has the gift of interpretation of tongues, and that person would interpret what that person is given. So, as I understand it, is an actual language, um, but it's in a language that helps. It has a purpose. It's not just blabber. Speaking in tongues is speaking in a way that others from other nations will be able to understand. Think about why this is important. When the book of Acts is being explained, it's talking, the whole book of Acts is showing how the gospel, the good news of Yeshua is spreading from Israel, from Jerusalem to the world. So the importance of this gift is saying all of these Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek speaking believers are all of a sudden going to be able to bring this good news to the world. How can they understand if they don't even speak these languages? That's where the power of the Ruach HaKodesh comes in and allows people to understand in that language. So, and you know what? I'll be honest with you. This is something that I'm praying to Abba that I would be able to receive this ability, because living here in Japan, my Japanese is not good enough to be able to deliver complex things, specifically spiritual matters. So I pray that Abba would use me to be able to speak to the Japanese people through the power of the gift of tongues and be able to speak to them in the way that they will understand. So I hope that makes sense. Um, Nomadic Hebrew says, question, do you believe Aramaic in the Aramaic primacy or Greek primacy in the New Testament? This is a debated topic. Um, Not all of the Brit Hadashah was written in Greek, and not all of it was written in Aramaic, and not all of it was written in Hebrew. We know for a fact that that normal language that Jews spoke in Israel was Aramaic. That was the main language. In the synagogues, the religious language was Hebrew, and we know that the common language coming in was Greek. Think about it this way. Um, Here in Japan, the main language is Japanese, right? Actually, no. Let me give you another example. How can I say this? No, yeah, yeah. Let's use that one. Let's use that example. In Japan, the main language is Japanese, so that would be like Aramaic was in Israel. When I go to synagogue, we use Hebrew, so that is the same thing that they did back then. They used Hebrew. But the language that is coming in and becoming the popular language is English, because that's the language that most of the world is using as the international language. So, in the same way, Greek was that international language. So, the books were written in different ways. And we know that Shaul could speak in all of those languages. He could speak in Hebrew and he can speak in, in Greek. We know that because even the Brit Hadashah lets us know this in the book of Acts. So when it comes to primacy, I don't know which one's better. I'd look at both. Daniel Lim says, can you explain the two witnesses in the book of Revelation? I already spoke about this before. I'm just going to put this out there. The book of Revelation is a book that is just full out interpretations. Nobody really knows the full meaning. Everybody has their own interpretation. And I'm not educated enough in the book of Revelation to be able to tell you what anything means. But I see that the two witnesses could be either two actual literal people or two groups, but I'm not sure. Alma says diverse language. Yep, that's what I said. Marcia says, so what is the original tongue that Pentecostals speak? Wait, what is the tongue that Pentecostals speak? I don't know. I don't know what they're speaking. Maybe best to ask a Pentecostal. But from what we see in the scripture, it doesn't tell us that it's blabber. It tells us that it's languages that people understood. And it has a purpose. The purpose is to glorify God. That's how I see it. I don't mean to offend anyone. I've even been to Pentecostal backgrounds, but I was so young that I had no idea what was going on. So um, I can't answer that. Let's see. Reverse of Babel. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I think that's amazing. Yeah, the gift of tongues is like the reverse of what happened at the Tower of Babel, where instead of all the languages being diversified, everything gets put again into one way that everyone can understand. That's really cool. Juliana says, fair enough. I don't have a clue either on the 144,000 hour. Thank you for the live stream. I've learned so much so far. Just subbed. Hey, Juliana, thank you. And thank you for becoming part of the family. Many blessings to you. Alma says, praying for you. Sola Scriptura Ministry says, keep up the good work. It shows that you're putting in a lot of time. As a brother that puts in a lot of time, a lot of your work, you can tell. Thank you. God bless you and your family from the East Coast, brother. Amen. God bless you, brother Sola Scriptura Ministry. You're amazing. Thank you for joining us. Jenny says, you make these videos so interesting. The time goes by so fast. What upcoming topics do you have? Oh, my goodness gracious. You're right. So we have finally reached the hour and a half mark. So we're going to wrap up, but let's just really, really quickly go about what we're going to talk about next. I don't know. This is what you're all here for. So the live streams are meant, whoops, the live streams are meant specifically for us to be able to communicate. If a topic comes up, um, I'll mention it in the community tab. So if you're watching right now, if you don't follow me on Instagram, go to Instagram. I'm on at Messianic Me TV, because there I'll also be asking questions like what topics you want to cover next and stuff like that. I also do it on the YouTube Messianic community page. So make sure you follow that. Make sure you turn on your notifications, because the live streams are the time where we converse from all around the world. And this is why I love it, because you're all in so many different parts. I'm here in Japan, and we can all really get together, especially especially now in these times when everybody's closed down and nobody can really fellowship. It's a good opportunity for us to be able to communicate. So follow these things. Follow me on Instagram. Make sure you're staying up to date in the community tab, because there we'll be able to talk about what topics we should cover next. I like having an overarching theme, and I really like what we did this time, that at the end we leave 30 minutes to just answer any questions that we have. It's really fun, and I really appreciate it. So yeah, that's how we will be able to do it. Let's go back. Let me go to the questions real quick before we go. Northeast Los Angeles Raider says, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom to you. Well, Shavuot Tov from Japan, because we're already in Sunday over here. Aaron James says, would love to learn Hebrew from you on this forum. I'm not a good Hebrew teacher. But you know what? Like I said before, if you want to get started, start with the Aleph Bet, learning the Hebrew alphabet. From there, even simple apps like Duolingo, they have Hebrew now, so that's a good way. Also, get yourself a siddur that has English, Hebrew, and the transliterated Hebrew, which is how you would read it. It really, really helps. So those three things are my suggestion to start on your Hebrew journey. And then after that, there's plenty of online classes that you could take. Franco Andres Caballero says, is there an email that you can be reached at? I would prefer that you would reach me on Instagram at Messianic Me TV, just because of the fact that I don't go to my emails often, and I'm most likely going to be here in YouTube on the community tab or on Instagram. So please message me there if you want to reach out and talk about anything else. I see the Hebrew here. I'm not gonna say the name, as you know, I don't say the name. But Jenny Rodriguez, I love your Shema song. Always sing it like that now. Oh, that's amazing. Hey, you know what? Don't make me cry in this live stream, but that's absolutely beautiful. I'm glad that rendition of the Shema was a blessing to you. All right, everyone, we're going to close this live stream. As I mentioned, stay tuned so that we can talk about what topics we'll cover about next. We'll always have a little time to also just ask any questions. I'll try to put out another video this coming week, just a random video, whatever comes to mind. And if you don't know this by now, I just put topics that are like really beating on my heart, and that's what I put out. I don't always have a schedule. I do have a list of videos that I want to make, but I only put ones that I really feel passionate about at that point. So that's why I did that. Um, but yeah, stay tuned and we'll talk about whatever we're gonna talk about next. Dr. Gemini says, "Thank you, Daniel, for the information. You did a great job. Yay! Glory to the mighty Creator, God of the universe. Thank you all for joining me. Let's go ahead and close this live stream. I just want to thank you all for being part of it. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for being part of the family. Thank you for your prayers and your blessings. I pray that the Almighty God will bless you and your family wherever you are. Remember that here we're a community where we're just trying to learn and share together. I don't claim to be a know-it-all, and I'm sure you guys don't, because as I can see in the comments here, you're also civil and kind and loving, and that's what I love. Even if we don't agree with everything that we have, like every thought that we share, it's okay because we're all just learning. And at the end of the day, we just love God and we just want to get closer to Him. So, shalom, shalom, everyone. Shavua tov. Have a blessed week and take care.